Okay, welcome everyone. Today in this session, we're going to look at what we call the scientific method. We realize that in science, we rely on what we call evidence, and actually in your arguments, you actually ask the question, what evidence do you have? Okay, if you're saying this is this, what evidence do you have? So in science, we rely on evidence that we get from research. Okay, so that research follows what we call the scientific method. So how do we investigate something and come up with evidence that this is like this because this is what we did and it resulted into this? So that is how scientists do their thing. That's how scientists prove or disapprove concepts. Okay, so we are going to see what is it really, what this scientific method, what is it, why do we need to carry it out, what are the steps, okay, what are the steps of that we can follow to come up with conclusions or knowledge, what we call theories or what we call principles or hypotheses. So we are going to see how we arrive at that. Okay, so let's basically start this session. So like I said, a scientist makes observations and goes and investigates those observations and prove whether those observations are accurate or not accurate. So scientists usually have a mindset of asking questions. Why is it that when you boil water, it boils at 100 degrees centigrade? Okay, why doesn't it boil at 70 degrees centigrade? That's an observation. So it's you have this observation that is based on a question that you have. So to prove to answer the question or to prove the statement that water will always boil at 100 degrees centigrade, you have to carry out what you call an experiment. So in science, we carry out these experiments following a framework. If you want to reach A, you have to go through C and B to reach A. Okay, so there is a framework that you have to follow to arrive at a conclusion, to arrive at the evidence that you want to prove or that you want to have. So that is basically what we call the scientific approach. Okay, it gives us knowledge about sciences. Okay, whether it is biology, whether it is chemistry, whether it is physics, we use the scientific approach in investigating matters. Okay, so we use the scientific approach in inquiring about concepts. It could be observations, it could be theories. We want to prove whether these are actually right or wrong. So we can say that the scientific method is an approach that allows us to investigate scientific matters objectively such that we can draw the right conclusion. So in summary, let me just illustrate this for the last time. I hope it will be very clear to you. We are saying that you want to prove if when you have hydrogen combines with the oxygen. This is why oxygen to give us water. How do we prove that this water is actually water? What proof is there? Okay, what is the proof? How do we prove that indeed this is the case? Okay, so we carry out an experiment that can test for whether the product that we have here is water. Okay, so we reach a conclusion that indeed when you have hydrogen and water, hydrogen and oxygen, you get water. So that is the proof. Are we clear with that? Okay, so how you investigate whether this is actually right, you follow the scientific approach to investigate this. Okay, so we are saying that scientists always have questions that they need answers for. So to arrive at the answers, they use the scientific approach to arrive at the answer. So why do we need it? We need it because we don't want people to wake up. For example, someone wakes up and they have dreamt that when you eat a lot of, let us say, vegetables, you cannot get a disease B. How do we prove? This was a dream. A dream is not something that you're going to say, yes, that is it. No, for us in science, if we cannot investigate and prove it, we cannot take it. We don't take it. So it has to be investigated and proved using the scientific approach. In that way, we are saying that we need to use the scientific approach, and therefore we avoid what we call subjectivity. Subjectivity here. Your thinking, your dreams, your feeling, your experience don't matter to us. What we are saying is that we want the scientific evidence for it. So for us to prove that vegetables cause this disease, we can say, okay, let us have two groups of people. Group C and Group D. We give these ones vegetables, these ones no vegetables. So we expect that people who eat the vegetables will not get the disease B. They will not get. Okay, and then this one who don't eat the vegetables will get the disease B. If we prove this, then yes, that is objective. That is scientifically objective. Scientific objectivity is when we conduct research and come up with conclusions, and we don't depend on your thoughts, what you feel, what you think. Okay, that's very important. Otherwise, we shall have a lot of people saying, hey, if you do this, you will not get this. And then we believe it. And then the message will spread out. What we call misinformation and disinformation. Okay? So unless it is proved with a scientific research, that's when you shall accept. So we don't want what we call fake news. Fake news or fake information is when we cannot prove it. You can't say that when you eat a lizard, you will be cured of HIV. Okay? Someone cannot come and say that they ate lizard and they are now not having HIV, yet they used to have it. Okay? So if someone says something like that, ask yourself a question whether indeed an experiment was carried out. In science, we live in experiments. So, we said that the scientific method is an approach of inquiring about concepts, theories, or observations such that you come up with valid conclusions. So, given that we are calling it a framework or an approach, or we are calling it a process. Okay, what you will follow to come to reach that conclusion. So what are the key things that you need to follow to reach that conclusion? First is the observation. Okay, observations. In our environment, there are a lot of things that are happening, or even things that we experience ourselves. So a scientist needs to be a person who is keen. They can use their eyes to see and say, hey, I see that every afternoon these organisms come and move around this area. What are they looking for? So you have made an observation and then you ask yourself a question. What are they looking for? Every time it is midday, these organisms do this. Okay? So they use their senses, sight, hearing, taste, and the other senses. Okay? About things that we see. Okay? Or even things that we don't really see, but we imagine that they do. Or for example, we say, when you eat, what happens to the food? It is going to be digested, but how does that digestion happen? Okay, so you have an inquisitive mindset. So there are a lot of things that you can really ask yourself on, whether in your daily life, whether you're at your workplace, regardless. Okay, you ask yourself questions. So for example, in chemistry, you can ask yourself, how does temperature influence the rate of a reaction? That's a question. Okay? And that question has come from what you are observing around you. Okay? So observations are key. After having an observation, now you say, okay, remember our example of the organisms that move to a particular area at particular times of the day. So for you, you're going, okay, maybe that is the time when the sun is bright and the environment is warm. That's why they move to that area there. So you make a prediction. You make a prediction, or you can call it, you make a predictive statement. A predictive statement saying these organisms move towards this area during the midday, during noon there, because it is warmer during that time and they are seeking for warmth. That's a tentative statement, or you can say it is a predictive statement. Okay, it's based on what you see and your logical reasoning, saying, okay, maybe that is the case. So that statement can also come from the fact that maybe you read something about it, but it was not really conclusive. So it is tentative, it is not conclusive. It's something that we can change. When we say tentative, we are meaning something that we can change anytime. So, and then that whole situation of these organisms moving is generally a phenomenon. It's generally a phenomenon. The whole situation is what we call a phenomenon. Okay, so you make this observation based on a phenomenon, then you make your hypothesis based on that phenomenon, and then you will now go and carry out an experiment to prove it. So that is stage number 3. Okay, you carry out an experiment to prove, that is to test the hypothesis. Okay, is the hypothesis correct or wrong? Do they actually go there because of the warm temperature or something else? Okay, so you design an experiment and check whether it is correct or not. And So going back to our example of the weather temperature, how temperature influences the rate of reaction. Now for you at a hypothesis level, you say that temperature does not influence the rate of reaction. That's the tentative statement, and that is what we call a hypothesis for that situation. So you can make very many statements or different situations. That doesn't mean that the hypothesis will always be the case, this like this. No, it will not always be like this. It can change depending on what you're investigating. Even the example of the organisms moving towards a particular area because of the sun, you also make the hypothesis in that case. So depending on what your hypothesis, what you're trying to test, you design an experiment. Okay, so usually the experiment can be designed in the laboratory, or it can be outside. Okay, biological experiments can be conducted in any place. Okay, you can carry out the experiment. For example, for those organisms, you can carry out the experiment in the field, where or the area where these organisms are staying, the habitat, or you isolate them and place them into an environment which is similar to the natural environment where they are staying. So you design an experiment. So in that experiment, you will be making what you call observations again. You'll be making observations and then measure. You make observations and then measure. So for our example of the rate of reaction being influenced by temperature, you are going to say, when I increase the temperature, because you're going to be changing the temperature, that's what you have control over. So increase the temperature, let us to 20, to 25, to 30, to 35. This is the temperature, right? And then for every temperature, you check the rate of reaction. Not even the rate of reaction, the products that are coming out of the reaction. So you say, when it was 20, the product, the amount or the volume of the product was 40 here. Here was 55. Here was 68. Here was 70. Okay, so this is what we have obtained. As you increase the temperature, you also measure the volume of the product, because it is a chemical reaction. You have the reactants and the products. Okay, so we are saying if you have A reacting with B, giving us C, so this C is the product. So the amount of this being produced is what we are plotting here. As you increase the temperature, you calculate how much is being produced. So you have that. And then you plot that on a graph, just like what you see here. You plot temperature down here, and then the volume of the products here on the y-axis. This is y, this is x. Now, here, now you're going to come up with conclusions about what you see. As you increase the temperature, this side, the rate of the volume of the product increases, meaning that the rate of reaction is also increasing, meaning that increasing temperature increases the rate of reaction. That is what you're going to do. So everything that we have done here is relates to what we have on this slide. That you'll be making observations about what, after you have designed the experiment, and then you make observations of what is happening, and then you'll be recording. The things that you'll be recording are the variables. the variables. Okay, the things that you'll be measuring are what we call them the variables. So these variables are divided into two. We have the independent variable and then the dependent variables. So for each experiment, you will have these two. Okay, you will have these two variables. You will have one that influences the other. So here, temperature is independent because it influences the rate of reaction. So the rate of reaction is dependent, whereas the temperature is independent. So usually, what is independent is on the x, what is dependent is on the y-axis. I hope that is very clear. Okay, so there is also another variable that you need to be considering, and that variable is what we call the control variable. So we see here we have only looked at these two, the rate of reaction as being reflected by the volume of the product against the temperature. So for you, assuming that only the temperature is influencing this, but there could be another factor that is influencing the rate of production of the product, or the rate of reaction generally. So you need to be aware of such issues. If you don't, it's basically like saying, let's go back here. It's like saying the factor T, which is the temperature, is influencing this. Yet there is another factor R that is also influencing this. So for you're interested in this, but there is another one. Okay, so this one here, you need to control it such that it is actually this one that you're investigating. So that's what we are calling control variable. So step number 4 is what the procedure development. Okay, before you actually go into collecting data, your first step here was that you need to determine what you're going to measure. Okay, so you have the independent variable, the independent variable, and the control variable. And then with step 4, what we are basically interested in is you saying that, okay, this is how the whole thing is going to flow. You write the steps, each step of the experiment. Why do you write the details of each step? Because you want another person for another scientist to repeat the same experiment and come up with the same results. That's what you want. Okay, so that is an issue to ensure what we call the ability to reproduce the same results. Okay, if I repeat the same procedure like what you have described, I should have the same results like you. Okay, so your results should be reproducible. They should be reproducible. And this is what we want in science. I do something, someone else should be able to do it and prove that that is actually what, that those are the right things that someone else did. Now you collect the data from the variables, the dependent and the independent variable. You tabulate them very well. You have tables, just like what I illustrated here, or just what you see here. This data here, these are the variables. You tabulate them very well, saying when the temperature was here, the volume of the product was this. You have the values, you have your table, a very nice table like that. So you tabulate, you collect, you feed in the what? The values. And then you analyze the values. And then, so for example, this is the table. After analyzing the values, you can now plot a graph to say this is what I found, label this very well, label this very well, use the appropriate units, put the appropriate units, the title, and you connect. These are some of the things that you studied in math or even in physics already. Okay, so this is to say that when you collect the data, tabulate them very well, and then plot them on a graph. Okay, or even come up with a pie chart, whatever way you want to present this information. Okay, then now you make a conclusion. So from here you actually already know that as you increase the temperature, this one is increasing. But if you have something like this, it means that as you increase the temperature, the rate of reaction decreases. If you have this red line that I've just drawn there, okay. So that these lines here give you a conclusion. You can also have a line that is like this. It's to basically say that the decrease in temperature does not affect the rate of reaction. Okay, if you have like a horizontal one. Okay, so you make a conclusion. Your data will tell you that conclusion. After proving it right, you share with others. In science, we share information. We share what we have found out with others. It can be in a scientific conference. You can share this on your social media platforms. You can write a book. You can do a lot of things. Okay, so you're actually very happy after proving something. So you have contributed to science. Okay. So one thing that perhaps did not come out in my explanation is the fact that the scientific process is not a linear process. I don't know how I can emphasize that so much, but scientists actually do fail. This is something that I want you to also know. What I've just described here is like it is a simple process you go through. Come up with your findings and share. No. Sometimes we design experiments and they fail. Okay, you don't come up with a conclusion, so it is not conclusive. Okay, and then you go back and design again, saying, no, this was not right. The hypothesis was not right. Let me repeat it. Let me reframe it. So many things can not go as you hoped. Or you can actually have what you call accidental findings. You are investigating about something else, and then along the way you get something that is totally different, but is also actually correct. So you get accidental findings, and there are many things in science that have been found through accidental. Like you realize in different phenomena from what you have been investigating. So there are some new things that can emerge. But basically, as you move forward, you can check and see if you're following the right direction. If you're not following the right direction, you come back and change some steps. So this is basically what we are having. That the description I've just made is just like this. But we are saying no. You can always come back and change some things. Maybe you did not make the right observation. Maybe you made the wrong hypothesis. Maybe you did not measure the right variables. So you come back and change things. So it's a process of learning, relearning until you. So it is what we call iterative process. Iterative process. There are some things that you learn as you're progressing, and then come back and change some of the things. And then before you go forward, iterative, such that you have very good findings eventually. So what does this tell us? As a scientist, you need to be very observant, very careful, very good at collecting data and presenting it with colleagues. Designing very appropriate research experiments is very, very key. It improves your ability to be very organized, make the right conclusions, And always, not always to be frustrated. You can always say, okay, I've failed here, but there's something that I've learned, and I'm going to do it better. And then you do it, and then move forward. So that is what the scientific process basically teaches us. It requires meticulous organization and the ability to learn from your previous steps.